the chat. So somebody who isn't in class could actually ask a question in it. I haven't really enabled that. Okay, so we've got our first little Angular page working. So I want to do a calculator. So let's go ahead and make a new page, new HTML file. We'll call it calculator.html. And we're going to create a JavaScript file. In our JavaScripts, we'll create a file called calculator.js. And in the header, well, we'll set the page title. And we want to link to all the other files that we had previously. So I'll just go back to my hello page. I will copy my CSS and JavaScript links, and then we'll add a link to our calculator.js. I'm just going to hello, copying my CSS and JS. We'll dump them in the header. And we'll add our third JavaScript link for calculator. So what we want is to make references. He mentioned in the video, we talked about mod JavaScript file. We can modularize them. Controllers always belong to a module. And so we're going to build inside of our calculator.js, we're going to build both a module and a controller in here that will do some basic math. So on our form, what we're going to do before we add the Angular pieces, we're going to add 3 or 4 elements. We're going to add 2 text boxes, a drop-down list, and then a what? Okay, so just maybe put in a div here. That's equal to container. We want an input type equals number here. Then we want a select with 4 options: plus, minus, multiply. So the user will enter a number. Done this in PHP, we've done C#, may as well do it with Angular. We'll add another number input type. On an equal sign, and then we'll put on a label. But no Angular at all right now. This is just straight HTML. We're just kind of setting up our interface. I'll just, we're not going to see very much on here. So there's our calculator. And yes, I know my label's floating off in outer space. I'm not going to worry about it. So just put on a heading here. So what we want is as soon as we put in a number, pick an operator. We shouldn't even have to click a button. Our calculated display here. So we're going to need to do a few things. The first thing we need in our HTML, we're going to wire our entire to Angular. So we'll need ng app, but in this case, we are actually going to specify the name of the Angular module we're going to create, which will be called calculator module. This is going to be declared, calculator app. This will be declared in our calculator JavaScript file. We now need to connect our two inputs, our select box and our label, to Angular values. So just like we did in our hello, we're going to add an ng model, and we'll call our first value x, which means we're going to have a variable we're referred to in our Angular code called x. It will be bound to this text box. Whatever's in that text box will automatically populate that variable as x. In our second text box, we'll do the same with our model of y. In our select, we also need to tie this because Angular needs to read what option the user picked. Our ng model will call op or operator. You can call it whatever you like. And down here, we want to display a variable called result. This is going to be an Angular variable. So what would we do on line 30 to display the result inside of that label? Yeah, we'll use the handlebars or the mustache syntax, and we'll display a result variable. The other thing we're just going to add here, we've got at the top our app. I'm going to attach this div to an Angular controller, which again is going to be inside of our calculator. We'll see this in a minute. So in here, I'm going to give this an ng controller attribute, and I'll call it calculator controller. Actually, sorry, this shouldn't be calculator app. This should be calculator model, I believe. So our app is the model. It's tied to our HTML document. And this div is tied to our calculator controller. So this should be everything we need in our HTML view. Nothing's going to happen. If we run it, we're going to get a bunch of errors because we haven't defined yet what calculator model and calculator controller are. Our page will load, but our JavaScript console is probably going to show us some errors. So yeah, it doesn't know what those things are, and result is obviously blank at this point. So we've done what we need to do on the HTML side. Our controller, and then do our calculation and submit a result back to the page. Okay, so we've done the front end piece. We kind of need to do the JavaScript. And open up Calculator. What we want to declare, we're going to call it Calculator app. And we just initialize that as empty. And now we want to define the controller within this module. So we use .controller. And we name it. This is what will tie that div to this section of our JavaScript. So here we've used ng controller. So anything we want to happen in this section is controlled here. And now we have a callback function like we're used to seeing with Node. So we have a function. And our function takes one parameter. It's a special parameter. In Angular, our variables are, this is represented with a $sign like in PHP. It's called scope. So this is an Angular keyword. What scope means, scope is the collection of variables. Basically allows our HTML and our JavaScript to pass values back and forth. So things like our X, our operator, our Y, and our result, they're all going to be part of that scope. Kind of like in Node, we have both request and response. In Angular, those are kind of tied together. The scope handles both. So it can be variables that are set here and passed to the page, or the other way around. It's two-way data binding. Let me close. So eventually we close that here. So I just want to pause for a minute to show you this visually. I meant to do this earlier, but we need to think of it. A traditional model, here's basically how it works. We get data from a model, we add it to our template. This is what we were doing with Node, with our EJS files. We grab some data using Mongoose, get our EJS template, which generates HTML, which is sent to the kind of one way. The way Angular works is like this. We have our HTML document, and this happens in a loop that as Angular updates our model, the model automatically updates the DOM. So when our model changes, Angular can automatically make those changes on the page. And this happens continuously. So it's two-way data binding. What we've done so far with Node is one way. The model into the template to the DOM. If we change the model, we'd have to refresh the DOM in order to see those changes. Continuous. The model and DOM are going like this. Angular's always checking. So now in here, we need to use this scope to evaluate our three inputs, X, op, and Y. Then we're going to perform a calculation and create another variable called result. We don't have to send result back to the page because it's already here, right, in that continuous loop. This will always stay up to date. So here's how we do it. We'll take our scope, and we want to access the variable we called result. And we use that function, calculate it. So we have four possibilities, right? We could add, subtract, multiply, or divide. For starters, let's just do this. Say return result will go here. So we won't even do a calculation yet. So in our controller, in our scope, we're setting this result variable which gets displayed. We'll take this out in a minute and we'll do a switch statement to do one of the four math operations. If I refresh my page now, my blue label should just say result will go here automatically. Okay, not quite. Let's figure what we did wrong. Calculator app. Maybe this should be. So sorry, yes, I did have it right the first time. Calculator app here. That has to match the name of my module here. I'm not entirely sure why this isn't showing my result in my label. Okay. Well, we'll do a full calculation. So what we could do, switch is more efficient. So what we want to check is our scope.op. That is the value of our drop-down list, is called op. So if the value is a plus sign, we're going to take our X value from our scope, add it to our Y value, and stop. This adds. At least does our add for us. Won't do anything else. Hopefully it will add those two numbers. Not yet. Here's our source select as ng model op. Whoops, I know what I'm missing. This is the result of a function, so we actually need brackets here. Bracket, bracket. That's our problem. So not a number until I put in y, and now it calculates. And it does it on every keystroke. Notice that it keeps adding. So it's that real-time data binding. As soon as my model's updated, my document object model is updated as well. anytime I add new characters. But now we need the other math operations in here as well. So I was missing the brackets here. So result isn't just a variable, it's a function call, right? Result is equal to a callback function. So now we need a case where we're doing subtraction. In this case, we will return scope X minus scope Y and break. And we'll do the same location division. Then we should have a little working calculator. Users picked multiply. We could also say, I think it's case else. Or is it just else? I have to think about that one. So now we should be able to try any of these, adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing. And Angular should automatically be updating our result every time. I'll just try it out. So if I change the operation, Angular updates it immediately. Because we have this two-way data binding with our document object model. Here's the code. So scope is an Angular keyword. You can't just call this something else. Scope is what allows these values to be shared between my Angular model and my HTML document in real time. Anybody have about what any of the pieces of our file so far, or how this is connecting up to our HTML document?
What does NG model stand
NG model, it tells it what is the name of the Angular module that is going to be interacting with this page. I called it calculator app here because you notice actually I made a mistake with it. I didn't name it consistently. Which section? Sorry, I was talking about NG app. You're talking about NG model. The bind shell. So it says this text box is linked to Angular variable we're going to call X. In this case, this dropdown is linked to an Angular variable we're calling up. So in the HTML side, we use ng model. to connect it, right? That's the syntax from HTML that binds any object in the DOM to something in the Angular side of it, we use scope. So this is the Angular equivalent. So in HTML, we use ng model, and on the Angular side, we use scope. So they're referring to the same value, but they use different names. Okay, does that make sense? So let's say we wanted to have a dynamic, like we had a profile page, we're using Angular. In fact, we saw it in the sample where we have an image, right? We'd have img source equals, and then we'd have an ng model there that would bind it to a variable that we could access in Angular using scope. So we'll get used to these. We'll be doing these all the time. ng app at the top on our HTML tag, our ng controller is, and then ng model for our individual values.
Can you go to the controller.js?
Sure.
Scroll down and switch. For the switch page, there should be a default also.
Ah, okay, right. So yeah, would that be default? I haven't done this for a while, so that'd be the syntax. So we could say two numbers, we could put in a message. So when it loads, when the page loads, it should say this by default, enter two numbers. And if they've picked the first option in the dropdown, which doesn't include sign, let's try that. Right, so it says enter two numbers. Still says that as soon as I pick, now we get our result. That looks better.
Mine's just where the label is, it's just saying result, it's just showing the result.
Okay. So you've needed stash.
That's exactly what it's displaying in the label.
Okay. So in that case, the problem's not here. The problem is in our JavaScript file, right? It's not rendering that, and you have those brackets, so it actually displays literally that. Okay. Do you have $sign in front of scope here?
Yep.
And down at the bottom, you need that semicolon here. You have that? So you've opened a curly brace. Okay, I'll have to look at it. Because I'm just going to answer your question here. So let's think about this. Let's think of, imagine this is how this is going to work when we're using Node and Express. Well, think about our add article page, right? We have two inputs. We have a text box for the title, and we have a text area for the content. When we add Angular into that, how are we going to, what will we add into those two controls? So right now we have an input. Actually, why don't I open up my file? I'll just open up. Let's go to my lesson 9 folder for a minute. So here inside of articles, here's our add.js file. So when we add Angular, what will we add? We have one text box and one text area. What will we add when we want to integrate Angular into it? You got it. So ng model equals title, right? That'll bind it to the title field in the database, and ng model here as well for content. So that's how it's going to work when it's all integrated, the full stack. Okay. Adam, there's nothing different? So even when the page first loads, it says that. Okay. And this says calculator app here, and calculator controller here. Okay. And here you've got ng app as calculator app. I think I put it in originally as calculator model, which generated error. Those have to match. because this is telling the document what Angular module it's connected to.
No, it's still showing.
And in here you have ng-controller. It's calculator controller. Okay, I'll have to look at it. I wanted to set up a simple to-do list with Angular, but it's going to be a little more involved than what we have. So rather than rush through it, I think we'll push that off to the start of class for next week. So we will build, well, I'll show you what it will look like. It's going to kind of work like this. Tell us how many tasks are in the list. We can add and view, and we can also delete. So notice there's no page reload here. So we're most of the way to a single page application. Even though we're not using the database, it's just a JavaScript array. Anytime I reload the page, it's wiped out. So this is kind of where we're going. So we'll have a text box with ng model. We'll have the ability to submit, and we will need to do both. We'll also need to do some routing. We'll need a post handler, and we'll need a delete function that is called on these buttons. Here's the actual HTML. You can see. So I've used the CDNs. We've got a controller here. We'll display the number of tasks using handlebars or mustache syntax. And then our form has an ng submit where we can call a function. Our input is bound to an ng till the end. And then we have another ng click to delete. So we'll implement this next week, and this is kind of what it's going to look like.
We have that for our assignment. Should we implement this?
You don't have to. It's not part of the requirement. Now your assignment is due, you have 2 weeks. So let me just look at it for a minute.
So,
You certainly can include Angular.
grab we do 2 weeks.
You do have 2
I
weeks.
thought it was the next week for
No.
2 weeks
tomorrow.
from now? 2 weeks from now, you mean? Okay.
So not the Monday coming up.
Correct.
Like Monday after that. okay.
Correct. And keep in mind, I don't know if you guys have class Mondays, but the college is open on Easter Monday. It's only closed on Good Friday. They asked us all. Let's see, what did I say for? You can implement Angular, it's not required. I don't know that I will give you bonus marks because we're going to be doing the lessons together before the assignment is due, really, at least the next lesson. So it would be a nice to have feature to add, but I want to see you do something in addition for bonus marks.
What if we handed it in before the lessons then?
That's going to be too complicated for me to keep track of. But certainly if you can fold Angular into it, it's a great idea, right? Because then you're showing that you've got a full mean stack application.
In your HTML, after ng model why do you have assigned?
I'm sorry, what line number?
29.
Line 21. Why do I have 29?
Why
Oh, that's just literally printing equals on my page. That's all.
You don't need it in, like,
No, that's just HTML text for the equation. That's all. So I've tried to go slow today just as an introduction with Angular. It's a big topic. There's tons of tools and resources out there. And I think one of the things we're going to do, and I have to figure out whether it's going to be part of class next week, whether it's going to be a lab. I'm just going to show it to you. But this is a fantastic resource for Angular. And I think we're probably going to do it as lab 6. Angular in their JavaScript, sorry, in Code School's JavaScript path, they actually have a free Angular course. This one is free, Shaping Up with Angular. So you're building a whole online gem store. It's all free using forms, custom directives. So I'm not sure whether we're kind of going to go through this in class. It might be an in-class lab. It might be a take-home lab, but it's a really good tutorial where they've got videos. You know, do the code samples online. It gives you hints. It's really good. Okay, so sometime probably next week, I think we might get into this. As I said, it might be take-home as a lab. And then we also want to look at how we integrate Angular into the little application we've been building in class. So when we're doing create, read, update, and delete, we can actually inject Angular into our EJS templates. So they're doing that real-time data binding if we wanted to. So that's where we're going over the next couple weeks. The other thing we're going to do next week is you guys are going to pick topics for weeks 13 and 14 for the lessons that you guys get to deliver, where I bring food and you guys teach. All right, so we'll do a kind of a sign up. I'll put up some topics next week and everybody will get to pick, I think there'll be 7 topics and you'll get to pick your top 3 choices and hopefully everybody will get one of their 3 choices. All right, that's it for today. I will